Welcome everybody to our industry update this month. Thank you so much for joining us. And just as a quick reminder, let's see, now of course my slideshow's not working. Here we go. We've got our upcoming updates, so save the dates. For the rest of the year, we've got them all scheduled out. These are going to be all of our upcoming subjects. So make sure and join us each month and tell your friends, the more the merrier. We hope this is really helpful content to you and to your business. And then without further ado, I'm going to let our speaker today kind of introduce himself, if that works okay, Eric, as far as your background and credentials. But I just want to give a huge thank you and welcome to Eric Nesbitt. He's a commercial real estate broker, as well as an attorney, and just super knowledgeable, a great steward of our industry, donates a lot of his time. And we just really appreciate your donated time today to share with us some updates about the commercial real estate market and also talk to some residential brokers about commercial and what that world looks like. So thank you, Eric, for being here. And with that, I'll just turn it over to you. And if you could share with everybody a little bit more about your background, that would be helpful. And we'll take it from here.
Well, thank you, Jill. That's a wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it. And thank you for hosting the seminar for us, or the webinar for us today. For those of you out there that are looking for a great title company, I would say definitely consider Jill for both residential and commercial. And she is my go-to title agent in those areas. So I highly would encourage you all to use her services if you got orders you need, O&Es, title reports, or whatever you might need on the title front. So with that said, yes, I'm Eric Nesbitt. I am one of these crazy guys that wears a lot of different hats. I am a commercial real estate agent, currently hanging my license with Keller Williams DTC in the Tech Center. And I'm the director of commercial real estate in that office. I'm also a licensed attorney with 30 years of experience, mostly in areas of real estate law that I've worked on. And I juggle my practice between, I spend maybe about 50% of my time doing law, and then 30 to 40% of my time chasing commercial real estate brokerage deals. I probably do 10 to 12 deals a year. Some are home runs, some are more singles and doubles, but I like to chase, and I like the feeling I get when I'm able to close on some of those larger deals. And if that weren't enough, I'm also doing a development project in Commerce City where we will break ground on a 60-unit apartment building in August, which will serve affordable housing in the income area of 30 to 80% of area median income. And that's going to be something I'm very proud of, and hope to do more development in the future and maybe phase a little bit out of perhaps the practice of law. But I think I'll be doing law until I'm 70, 75, drafting deeds, Damian, and reviewing leases to help pay for my golf game and things like that. So it's hard to give up one of the disciplines I've been doing, and I'll probably do a lot of that over the next 15 to 20 years. I enjoy what I do. So with that said, as Jill mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit today about the state of the Denver commercial real estate market, and it's not a pretty picture. So we will get into that and kind of give you guys a sense of what's going on in that sector and how it will impact you all as residential agents, not only residential agents, but just as U.S. citizens. I mean, there's some gloom and doom out here, and a lot of it is real. A lot of it's going to happen. It kind of feels to me like 2008 again, before the collapse of the banking industry because of the subprime mortgages. Things are a little bit different this time around, but some of the danger signs are there. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then if I don't...
Eric, you sound like an attorney. Aren't we always half-empty kind of guys?
I know. I can't help it. And then if that weren't enough, or if I haven't scared you all about commercial real estate, then I'll give you some of my tips as to how you can get into commercial real estate if you have an interest in taking that on or supplementing your practice to do both commercial and residential. I'll give you what I think are some of the best strategies and tools to do that. And then we'll leave some time for questions and answers. My distinguished colleague here, Damian Cox, is here to join, and we'll probably have some banter back and forth on some of these various issues and talk about them a lot. So if you want to ask any questions during the session, I don't mind being interrupted. If someone, I don't know if they can do that, Jill, if they can jump in and ask, or you can put some questions in the chat. I probably won't have the chance to review those as I'm talking, but feel free to ask questions before or while I'm making the presentation or afterwards. It doesn't matter to me.
We'll keep an eye on the Q&A, and I'll, as questions pop into the Q&A, so.
Okay. All right, so let's just dive in here because we only have an hour, right, Jill? Got until 3, so let's just dive in. I did do a slideshow that I thought would be helpful in us kind of talking through the commercial real estate issues. Can you all see that?
Yep, it's up.
All right, beautiful. So let's just dive in here. As I said, the state of the Denver commercial real estate market, the word I would use is problematic, and not only problematic for the Denver market, but around the country. And when we talk about commercial real estate, I like to break it up into categories or classifications. A lot of people just think generally, how's commercial real estate doing? And that's really not how we talk about it. It really should be spoken about in different asset classes. So with that said, the main asset classes that are of interest are office, which we'll talk about, multifamily properties, industrial, and retail. And there are other classes of commercial real estate: land, hospitality, specialty properties such as churches or maybe amusement parks and things like that, theaters. But these are the 4 kind of meat and potato type of classifications. So when you think about commercial real estate, think about these buckets and how they affect the economy. And the one that probably has the arguably the biggest impact on the economy and what's going on right now and causing the most stress and discomfort is the office market. This is quite the statement, the first bullet here, but Denver has the worst ranked office market in the country. Think about that.
That's amazing. Are you
It's
serious?
amazing, isn't it?
I did not see that coming.
Yeah, and it's due in part to negative absorption. And without boring you with the details as to what that means, it really is supply and demand and the sum of space that physically is occupied by office tenants versus what space is vacant. And last year we had negative absorption, which means there's a lot more supply out there than there is demand. The vacancy rate in the Denver market now is 15.2%, which is compared to the historical average. Typically it's around 11 or 12%. So that tells you we're trending well above where the market has been in the past. And you don't have to really think long and hard about what's causing some of the issues we're having in the office market. There are long-lasting effects from the pandemic and the hybrid work models. Obviously, during COVID, those that were going into the office couldn't go to the office anymore. And all these hybrid models were put in place to allow employees to work from home. And like it or not, they worked for most employers. They had to work, they had no choice. And when the COVID restrictions started easing up, a lot of the employees and employers agreed to go to these hybrid work models where people don't need to go back to the office anymore. Well, you can imagine what kind of impact and effect that's had on the office market downtown Denver, as well as other major markets around the country. So it's And a lot of the companies where they would, they've decided they would just reduce their footprint. So maybe an oil and gas firm in downtown Denver, and we're known for the oil and gas sector in terms of being a large office user. They might in the past take down 3 floors or 60,000 square feet. Maybe they're only going to take half of that now. Maybe they're going to go to a building that doesn't have the same high rental rates as they've been in the past. So there's a lot of reason for companies reevaluating and taking a look at their space needs and saying, we don't have to do things like we did in the past. The margin between the sublease and direct lease space, and again, I don't want to get into too many details. We only have an hour, but sublease space, as you might imagine, is space that is not directly leased by the landlord, but it might be a tenant that needs to get out of space. Typically, the margin between that direct space rent quoted and the sublease space quoted was about $2 on average. Now it's $9 a foot between what, and there's a bulk of sublease space all over the market now. I just did a deal for a client in the Cascade building in the tech center, and they were looking to sublease about 15,000 square feet, and the building's quoting $30 a foot. And Damian, we gave that space away for $15 a foot.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
And I told my client, are you sure you want to give it away that? And you know my client, but I won't give any names out, but I told my client, are you sure you want to give that space away for that amount of money? It's half of what you have to pay the landlord. Well, she was so adamant that she wanted to get that space leased. That's what we had to do. And we got takers, and the landlord agreed to that reduced space because in our lease covenant, there was language that didn't allow us to market that sublease space less than 85% of what the building was marking it at. But the landlords realized we're in a dire time, and they were willing to allow us to get aggressive about how we marketed that space.
Did you say there's a lot of sublease out there like this? I mean, this is not an uncommon thing right now.
Huge. There's a lot of sublease, which is contributing to the down numbers. We have the high vacancy rate. That vacancy rate I quoted earlier includes both direct space and sublease space. So it's a full number. And downtown is worse. I mean, I didn't go give you the numbers on downtown, and we'll talk about that in the next slide a little bit, but there's a lot of sublease space that's competing with the direct space.
Wow.
Despite the bad news in office, there are companies looking to lease space. For instance, high-end law firms are looking to lease space. And what I mean by the last bullet point here, flight to quality, those law firms and other users are looking for spaces that are new, that have a lot of the bells and whistles and tenant amenities that will bring employees back to the office, that are in nicer areas of town, et cetera. So the developers that built that product over the last couple of years before COVID set in, they're probably going to be okay, but they're still going to face some vacancy issues. All right, so I've got a Jeopardy question I'm going to ask Jill and Damian. And the question is, this is the tallest building in Denver. Go.
Isn't that the Exxon building? Or the old?
Maybe it may have been called by the Exxon building. I'm not a native, so I might not. Don't do that, Jill. It is Republic Plaza.
Republic Plaza, yeah.
Is that the Exxon building, Damian?
I don't remember. I thought it was I thought the cash register building was the Exxon one, but which is the Wells Fargo Center now. But so, I don't remember. It's a long time ago, Eric. It's been a long time. Understand. That I didn't tell you that Jeopardy question was coming, so it was a bit unfair, but just thought I would throw it out there to you guys. So to kind of hammer home on Eric, just so you know, Eric Gold got it. So
he got what? Oh, Eric Gold got it?
Eric Gold got it right.
Figures. Republic Plaza, and you guys probably know this, but for those in the audience, just to kind of hammer home on what's going on with commercial real estate and the issues we're having. The loan on this building became due in December and is now in default and close to foreclosure, as is the Wells Fargo Center loan. So these are trophy properties in downtown Denver that are recognizable. As I said, Republic Plaza is the tallest building down there. There's 33% vacancy, in Republic Plaza, 32% vacancy in the Wells Fargo Center. Due to the vacancy in Republic Plaza, the value of that building decreased over the last 4 to 5 years from 535 million to 298 million. And the reason that's the case is because tenants aren't in the building. The cash flow of those buildings has gone down, which obviously impacts the value. So that's had a drastic impact on the value of these properties downtown. Wells Fargo, the same thing. Their loan became due on this building last year, and 134 million is owed on that building, and a special servicer is in place. Typically, special servicers come in when the tenant has defaulted under the terms of the lease, and the lender wants to make sure the payments are going to the payments are being used for the debt service on the building. So in both of these buildings, they're under special servicers now. Damian?
Yeah, real quick. And just to be clear, that just because it's the Wells Fargo Center, it's not Wells Fargo that owns it, is it?
No, this is Brookfield owns half of Wells Fargo. Brookfield is a large real estate investment trust, and I can't remember, it's owned 50% by another entity. I think Brookfield owns all of Republic Plaza and 50% of Wells Fargo.
Wow, so they're in trouble.
Yeah, they're in trouble. Yeah, they're in trouble. And you know what this all means for the general economy is not only are we seeing this, I mean, these are classic large office buildings in Denver. This is happening all over the country. And the economists tell us that $1.5 trillion of debt on these buildings, these type of buildings or commercial real estate, will become due over the next 2 years before 2025.
Which is outrageous amount of money. I mean, that's more than ever in our history. I believe, Eric, you know better than me, but
yeah, it's a lot. And what a lot of people out there listening may not know, commercial loans are different than residential loans. So you have residential loans that are set for 25 years or 30 years. The typical term of a commercial loan is 5 years. So a lot of these loans are going to roll due over the next year or so. And a lot of them have 30–40% vacancy in these buildings. And what's going to happen? The landlords are going to walk away or give the keys back to the lender. And then the lender, these banks, are going to have this bad debt on their books. And we're probably going to see more banks fail, not just as a result of the commercial real estate market, but a large part of the issues or the failures for banks in the future are going to be a result of being tied to these commercial real estate loans. So it's a dire situation we're looking at. Again, it kind of reminds me of 2008, not to sound too dismal, but that's kind of where we're at.
It's like commercial is in it, not maybe residential, but last time it was residential that dragged down commercial. This time it might be the other way around.
Correct.
And I can't believe how doom and gloom you are. I thought I was the only one allowed to be that doomy and gloomy.
Yeah, it's a tough position that we're in. And when I get to the slide later talking about strategies for getting into commercial real estate, one of the things I'm not going to advise you all to do is get into become an office broker because it's probably not where you want to be. There's a lot of obsolescence too in some of these buildings. So the buildings that don't look like Wells Fargo or Republic Plaza, C-class buildings that don't have all the bells and whistles and amenities, they're going to face more tragedy or dire situation in these buildings, and will have to be scraped at some point or redeveloped into something else. As we were talking before we got on, Damian, there's a lot.
I was going to say there's actually a question here from Joan that says, with so much large office buildings being empty, do you think some of them will become affordable housing units in the future? So why don't we do that at the same time? Because I know exactly where you're going.
Yep. So there's a lot of discussion about, can these buildings be retrofit or redeveloped for affordable housing? And the answer is yes, but there's a great amount of capital improvement and dollars that have to go into doing that. These buildings obviously weren't initially developed to be housing or residential units. So not to say it can't be done, but it's easier said than done. It's a lot more challenging to retrofit some of these buildings into residential uses when they've been commercial all this time, but it can be done.
Yeah, question's going to be what price do they end up selling the final
Yes.
asset for if it goes back to these banks? And
Right.
you know, and
And it may just be better to scrape, particularly these older buildings, it may just be better to scrape those buildings. So.
Eric, I have a question, kind
Sure.
of going back to your previous slide. So those numbers, those are pertaining to the downtown Denver market. Does DTC look similar in terms of the numbers? It's kind of, I think a lot of us think of DTC as kind of a mini Denver.
DTC, the numbers on this slide are for the entire Denver office market, and you've got
Okay.
three main sectors or submarkets of office. You've got DTC, obviously you've got downtown Denver, and then you've got Highway 36. You've got an office corridor off of that in that area as well. So this kind of combines all of that. To answer
Okay.
your specific question, DTC is not doing as bad as downtown, but it's still suffering some of the same issues because of the hybrid work models and people not coming into work and things like that. So it's facing some of the same issues. If there's a market in town that seems to be doing pretty well, they would be Cherry Creek. There's new product there. People want to be there. It seems to be insulated a bit from some of the economic factors that you see in other submarkets around the city.
Interesting.
All right, so that's office. Don't let your baby grow up to be an office broker, maybe is a lesson there. All right, let's talk about multifamily housing, another major segment of commercial real estate. This was a strong asset class coming out of the pandemic, and it continued to do well even as housing suffered a bit. But when inflation took place and interest rates started rising, we saw concerns in this asset class as well. And I think multifamily will continue to do well, particularly as it's more challenging to buy homes. If interest rates remain in the 6 to 7% range, that's going to bode well for developers of multifamily and owners of multifamily. But despite this market showing signs of growth and doing well out of the pandemic, there's concerns that exist due to the recession and inflation that we see coming. And the market is overbuilt. I mean, all the cranes that you see when you drive around downtown and other areas of the city, there's been a lot of construction and activity on the multifamily side. And now chickens may be coming home to roost, so to speak, because there might be too much supply out there. And with consumers having concerns about inflation and the recession, and maybe families not looking to start, or younger individuals and millennials not looking to start families as soon as they might have due to these concerns about the economy, that's going to have some downward pressure, I think, on how well the multifamily market will do in the future. There's a new Denver affordable housing mandate that went into effect last year that also will have a impact on development in the city. And basically in Denver, if you're a developer and you're doing multifamily, you've got to have, I think it's 15% of the units need to be at an affordable level. And if you don't do that, there's a penalty you've got to pay the city, or you're not going to get your permit approved. So the last day before that law went into effect was July 1st, I think, of last year. And they saw a rush of permits and building plans submitted to the city. And then that declined after that date. And we're seeing some uptick in building permits and so on. But a lot of developers are saying they don't want to deal with this new law and maybe looking at other cities to do their multifamily development. The downtown market is one of the most fastest growing markets in the country, only behind Miami and Nashville. So again, that just shows you that there's been a lot of construction, and it's been good for a long time, but I think we might be reaching a point of equilibrium or over equilibrium where there's more supply. And that's good for the consumer because rents will go down, and it probably will be good for people who are looking to get into those type of places. But I don't think this market is going to be as robust as it's been over the last 4 or 5 years.
Hey, Eric, real quick,
go ahead.
There is other affordable housing mandates in others, I'm sure in other cities across Colorado. I just, this isn't just Denver that might have seen some of that influx of stuff, correct?
You're right, Damian. I picked Denver, obviously, focusing on the major.
We just have people from all over the state.
Yeah,
so
I forgot
sure
about
they know that this isn't just a Denver issue.
That's right. That's right. So, well, and that's a good segue actually to talk about this legislation that was passed by the Colorado legislature a couple weeks ago, where there's a right of first refusal in place that will impact private owners of multifamily properties that are seeking to sell their property.
You better start over and talk about from the beginning what that bill does and everything, because I'm sure a lot of people, this is the first time they're hearing about this.
I'm going to pass it over to you to let you do that, because like I said, I think you have designs to be in the legislature anyway.
Oh, geez, no, thank you. No, thank you.
No, but why don't you take us through that?
Well, I'll take you through what I know. I'll tell you, I don't know a ton about the bill, but essentially what it's aimed at is that the legislature has concerns about affordable housing. And because they have concerns about affordable housing, what they did is they said, what we want to do is give municipalities the ability of getting these first right of refusals. In other words, if a multifamily home comes on the market, then the city can exercise this first right of refusal and buy the property instead of it going on the open market. They'll have that right first. But it has a whole bunch of different problems with it. For starters, there's no money allocated to it, so the cities would have to have some kind of funding in order to even exercise on those first right of refusals. But then the time frames, and Eric, I'm going to let you talk about the time frames and 1031s and how this could really impact a bunch of people so that they know what that's going to look like.
Yeah, I was looking before our call, I was looking at the state site, and it looks like, so for the ROFR to be exercised, right of first refusal, it's got to be 14 calendar days. You've got to give the municipality to exercise that right of refusal, and then another 60 calendar days to make an offer. So that's a long time. And to make an offer, and must agree to close on the property within 120 calendar days. So I know a good friend of mine is a multifamily broker in town, and I saw him sweating bullets when he learned that this legislation had passed, because it really is going to impair the ability of these sellers to sell their property when you've got to worry about what the local municipality may want to do regarding the right of first refusal. And I think it's going to have a stifling effect on the demand for those type of properties.
Well, and then the other problem is if the seller wants to do a 1031 exchange and identifies another property, can you talk about what that looks like and how this thing could really muck up those things?
Yeah, that's something I hadn't thought a lot about, Damian, but you're right, because under the 1031 rules, as you all out there probably know, you have to identify within 45 days. And if you've got the legislature out, or if you've got the local municipality out there saying they have more time in which to decide whether to buy the property, then obviously that's going to impact the seller's ability to find replacement properties. And it just causes a whole lot of issues. And what I'm hoping is some of the jurisdictions or the municipalities around the state decide not to adopt this legislation, but I don't know. Only the future will only be able to know in the future whether that occurs or not. But it could be very problematic from a 1031 buyer perspective. That's
a good point. I mean, the municipalities don't have to say they're going to exercise or that they want to adopt this. So that's a good point.
Beth wrote, seems like it would kill the 1031 ability. And what about market price? Will they lowball? They can't lowball, so to speak. The right of first refusal by its nature, they would have to match the price that's in the initial offer, Beth. But obviously, to the timing of it in the 1031, that's going to be very problematic to the buyer there, or to the seller rather.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like they really thought about the 1031 implication
No,
when they did.
I think that's right. Unintended consequences. Is that what we hear down there a lot?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Let's move to industrial and another strong asset class, or another asset class of commercial real estate, and arguably one of the strongest classes that we'll talk about today. It has done well through the pandemic and after post-pandemic. And you can imagine why that's the case. Just kind of the opposite of what happened on the office side. This is the other side of the coin where you had people at home ordering on Amazon, eBay. All those products need to sit somewhere. Amazon comes in and leases 500,000 square feet of space near DIA, and other e-commerce providers need space to house all those items. So industrial's done pretty well, and it was already doing well before the pandemic due to the need of marijuana grow houses to have facilities and other manufacturing and distribution operations. So it's done well and it continues to do well, but as is the case with the other sectors of the commercial real estate asset classes, inflation and economic uncertainties are going to impact this market as well. Vacancy for industrial product in the Denver area is currently 6.2%, and that's one of the highest rates in the country.
That's
and again,
surprising too.
what happens is,
Yeah.
It's supply and demand. When developers see that a market, a category is doing well, i.e. multifamily or industrial, they swoop in, they start developing product and they overdevelop. And then the market comes to equilibrium, and then you have more vacancy, and then rents go down for those particular product or those particular asset classes. So we see rents beginning to decline and expected to fall below the 10-year average. The 10-year average is about just over 11%, $11.88, I should say, is the actual rent average right now. And the average over the last 10 years has been about $11.10. And we think rent rates are going to continue to go down and get closer to that mark. But industrial, I think, will continue to do well. It may be overbuilt in about a year as well, just based on what I said about oversupply and developers coming in and overbuilding. And then last but not least, is retail. And retail has had its ups and downs. Obviously, coming out of when the pandemic started, nobody was going to the store. There were empty shops. Restaurants were closing. Restaurants were doing okay, but not to the same level they were performing pre-pandemic. So things weren't looking too well. And then the government puts all the money into the economy, which Damian probably doesn't like that, but that's a side story. So the government puts all the money into the economy in the form of checks for people to get out and spend and help people out and so forth. And that helped the retail sector. So people went out and started spending again. And then interest rates start climbing and concerns about a recession hit. And then people are more uncertain now as to what they're going to do, how they're going to spend their money. People are going to probably start saving more, and that's going to impact retail and the ability and construction in that sector, as well as rental amounts and supply and demand and vacancy rates there. So it's hard to say how this sector will fare going forward, but I think over the next year, as concerns about a recession continue to take hold, the retail market is probably not going to do as well as it has last year or the year before that, when all the money was in the economy. So what are the takeaways of all this? Everybody probably has their personal opinion as to if we're in a recession or not. I think if we're not in a recession, we're probably pretty close. And I do believe that interest rates, I hope the Fed doesn't raise interest rates again. I think they're going to keep those hopefully where they are, and maybe they'll start going down by the end of the year. I've heard economists say that, but we're not sure about that. But as long as there are concerns about the economy and all of this debt out there on the commercial real estate properties, that's going to have an impact on banks, local banks and large national banks. And a lot of our money are in those banks. And to the extent they suffer, the economy is going to suffer. You're going to see probably bank failures continue into the new year, based primarily on all the debt on these office buildings. I anticipate that in the horizon. And, when people are uncertain about the economy, they don't spend as much. So I think the retail sector is going to be impacted by that. The retail sector impacts the industrial sector because people won't spend on eBay or on Amazon as much as they used to. And a lot of that will impact their desires, these consumers' desire to buy housing, et cetera. So I don't think there are direct impacts from the commercial real estate challenges that are faced to the residential market. But as long as I think the close tie to commercial real estate and how strong the economy is going to cause concerns and maybe have consumers not spend on things like homes, or it's going to really impair or impact the desire of people to buy homes in the next year or so. So that's kind of my takeaway on that. Thoughts on that one, Damian?
Well, the one thing that I've seen and is, there's also this question about the credit crunch, which I think you're alluding to with the office space, because they're not going to be able to refinance. But a lot of that isn't, what I read was that a lot of the commercial is held by the mid and small tier banks. It's not held by the big guys, which are the ones that are struggling with the, Silicon Valley and Republic and all those other guys. That's where they're struggling. So the question is, who's going to fill that void of commercial lending if those banks are like, well, we can't renew this because we can't justify the loan and there's a credit crunch. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think the void will be filled. I think the owners of these properties will give the keys to the lenders, and the lenders will seek to sell the properties just like they did in past years during the Great Recession and so on. So I think a lot of lenders have already decided to stop lending on commercial real estate property. And I think that's going to continue until there's some stabilization, or if people start going back to work and there's more of a demand for office space. But I don't think that market will ever be the same as it was. I think there will always be less of a demand, or companies will look at their office space a little bit different and employ these hybrid models going forward.
It's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. All right. We don't have any questions in the chat on that. So if no one has questions on the general state of the commercial real estate market, I'm going to move to my thoughts on techniques for residential agents to get into commercial real estate. And I've been doing commercial real estate now for about 25 years. And as I said, I'm a little bit different, I guess, and unique in that I juggle both my law practice and my commercial real estate brokerage duties or interests. And it's worked for me. I've got a pretty good staff, and we do things efficiently, I like to think. And I don't have to do a lot of deals in a given year, 8, 9, or 10 deals for me. That's enough to get me excited and kind of get my blood boiling a little bit. And I like practicing law as well. So it's a nice balance for me, even though there are times when it's hard to sleep and I'm worried about what's going to happen on the legal side or what's going to happen on the real estate side. So for those of you out there that are interested in getting into commercial real estate, despite what I've said, and it wasn't my intent to scare anyone away from doing that, but there are opportunities to get into this field. And I think the best approach is to start with training and classes that are out there. Probably the best class reference I can give you is CCIM, which is the Certified Commercial Investment Member Designation. And although they have a series of courses you can take to get your designation as a CCIM, I think everyone should consider taking the CCIM 101 course, which is financial analysis. And that's a 4-day course where you're able to dive in. They'll give you workbooks and models. They will explain how to calculate things like cash flow, or cap rate rather, cash on cash return, discounted cash flow analysis, things like that. It's a robust class where you can really understand the bones or the kind of the structure you need to underwrite a lot of these commercial real estate deals. That class, the last I checked, is about $1,100, but well worth it. And obviously, if you want to take all of the classes and get your designation, that would be a great way to go as well. But I highly encourage you to look at that. There are other ways you can learn about commercial real estate. I'm part of Keller Williams or KW Commercial, and I think we have a pretty strong platform of educational tools for clients out there, for interested agents who want to transition over and start doing commercial, in the form of webinars and classes that are taught online that you can learn about different asset types, et cetera. I would also encourage you all to get a mentor and not do these things on your own. We know that the commission frowns on agents that don't have the competency to work on a commercial real estate transaction. So if you run across a deal and you don't have those qualifications, seek to find someone to help you do those deals. For instance, what I do is I team when clients or when agents have commercial deals, they'll send those deals over to me and I'll pay a referral fee. If they have an interest in kind of learning the process, I'm more than happy to get them as involved as they want, in the form of copying them on all emails to their client, bringing them on property tours, explaining how I ran the financial analysis, et cetera. I don't mind doing any of that. And I don't mind co-brokering a deal with an agent as well, if they would like to do that, just to get their name on the listing and get some experience in that area. So that's another idea I would give you to really have someone close in mind you could work with on doing these deals. They're very different from residential deals. You can get yourself in trouble if you don't know what you're doing. So reach out to someone who has competency and the ability to do these deals and has the level of experience you want. Specialization is another thing you should think about when considering commercial real estate. I just laid out the 4 asset classes that are most important in commercial real estate. Most commercial real estate agents will specialize in one area or another. I'm more of a generalist, and I do that because I'm part of Keller Williams and I get leads from different agents who want land sold or office space leased, et cetera. And I just happen to have gained experience in a lot of these areas over the last 20 years I've been doing it. But if you're new to commercial real estate, pick one of those asset classes we talked about and maybe focus on that. And I think,
but not office, right, Eric?
Not office. Not all. Give it. There are people out there that think office will come back in 5 years. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but you never know.
And there's probably an opportunity there. Anytime you have a market fluctuation, there's probably some form of opportunity. So we shouldn't be so death on it. But
yeah. The asset class that I think has the lowest hanging fruit would be, in my opinion, multifamily, because many of you out there are selling homes, and you may have sold homes to clients who have bought those homes as investment properties and they're renting them out. And perhaps they have a few of those properties and it makes sense for them. Maybe they want to buy, instead of having 5 or 6 homes around the city, maybe they buy a 10 unit or a 15 unit. So you can transition into doing those type of deals for your client. And I think that lends itself to the easiest transition, as opposed to getting into industrial or retail and not having any experience in those areas. So think about that. Land might be also another good area you can transition into if you've got experience doing that on the residential side, dealing with any land issues. So I would consider that as well. And then the business development strategies are different with commercial real estate, but they still need to be followed. And just the same things you're doing to develop clients on the residential side, you've got to do that, but in a different way on the commercial side. So that might mean instead of going out and knocking on doors in a neighborhood, you're walking through, well, before the pandemic, I would walk through buildings and try to talk to decision makers to see if their lease was coming up soon or if they had an expiration or something. So I don't know if you're going to do that now because the buildings are going to be empty, but you've got to use those business development strategies. If your friends and families, the same ones you've asked about, if they need a desire, if they have an interest in buying a home, now you're asking, do they have, is their company looking for space to lease? Do they want to make an investment in commercial real estate property? I did a lot of coffee meetings and leads groups as a young commercial real estate agent. And I think you have to do a lot of that. And some of your deals at the beginning are going to be very small, but you learn on those little deals. And then they say in the industry, it takes as much time to do the big deals as it does the little deals. So as the more experience we get, we don't really want to do those little deals, which may be why some of you call commercial agents and they don't call you back because they may not be excited about the size of a deal. That's not me. I always call people back, but we get a bad knock sometimes for not responding because sometimes the deal volume or the deal size is just too small to get us excited. But as a newbie, you can work on those smaller deals, kind of cut your chops and do bigger deals in the future. So these are all areas I think where you can use these techniques to try to transition over to commercial real estate. There's also kind of a hidden rule or a thought among commercial agents. If agents are doing both residential and commercial, we kind of don't look at them as commercial agents. So if you do have the ability to ultimately transition out of residential and do just commercial deals, that's going to give you more credibility in the industry. And then when you are speaking to and doing business development to try to get commercial deals, you don't have to worry about residential agents you approach thinking you're going to poach them for their clients. Because I don't do any residential transactions on my own, and my people that refer me business don't have to worry about me taking their clients.
And the caveat to that would be is if you're in a small market like Niwot, you might be doing both, or
that's true,
or something. So there is some places where that rule isn't general, but there is, if you're in a larger market, was it ComRes or ResCom that they're referred to by commercial brokers?
Yeah. In those tertiary markets, smaller markets, that rule doesn't apply. It's okay to do commercial and residential because oftentimes the pool is in Eric Gold just wrote residential. Yeah, that's right. So in those smaller markets, you don't have to worry about, you don't have to worry as much about doing both of those things. But if you're in Denver and you're seeking to do both commercial and residential, you call a commercial agent, they're not going to take you too serious. That shouldn't be the way it is, but it is. That's the way it is. So we have a question from Joan, and she says, in your opinion, when a space is used as a grow house, does this affect it being sold or leased out later? Just curious. That depends. I don't think so. There might be some environmental concerns if a space is being used as a grow house. An industrial space is being used as a grow house, and it may put the property more at risk of having contaminants or environmental issues down the road. But I think if the revenue production or the revenue from that income you're going to generate from that user is enough, it's probably worth your time worth it to enter into that type of lease with that user.
The next one is, what about hospitality industry? Do you think it will have big impact? And I think we're going back to the questions about what's coming with the economy, and they're just wondering about hospitality.
Yeah, I think just like I expressed concerns with the economy and perhaps a recession coming. All of that is going to impact travel, which will in turn impact the need and the demand for hospitality space, not to the same degree as during the pandemic when we couldn't travel and hotel space wasn't being used. But I think anytime Americans are concerned about what's going to happen, and I think it's safe to say we're all a bit on edge and not sure what's going to happen, that's going to probably impact our spending habits, which will impact how good this industry, how the hospitality industry does, or the other classes of real estate I talked about. And Diana asked, where can I find this class? And I will let Jill.
I think she was referring to the CCIM financial class that you were talking about.
Oh, sorry. Diana, go to ccim.com and you will find the class on that site. I also teach a class through the Damian Cox School of Real Estate, which is a phenomenal educational school. I teach a class through that on the introduction to commercial real estate. And that class is, I believe, 3 hours. So I don't know if we have any schedule on the calendar now, Damian, but we probably will get one on the calendar by the end of the year, I would suspect.
Yeah, exactly. Usually.
Absolutely. That's a great class. I mean, you've all seen just how Eric presents. He's just so clear. He takes a big subject. He makes it really easy to understand. So if you want to cut your teeth some more and dive into the commercial aspect, definitely take that class. You'll get a ton out of it. He does a great job.
Well, that is all I have. Unless anyone has any other questions. Did we cover everything, Damian? Anything else we need to talk about?
I think you covered everything that I've seen as far as the concerns that I've seen in commercial. Obviously, you've mentioned a lot more than I even touched on because this is your world more than it is mine. But yeah, that was a lot of information. Jill, you have anything else?
I don't think so. Eric, do you mind typing your contact information in the chat for everyone? Definitely,
Sure.
If you do come across a commercial deal and you want Eric's mentorship or looking to refer that transaction, definitely reach out. So we'll make sure his contact info is in chat there.
All right,
He's
I
a
will do
wonderful
that.
resource, as you can see, and always so generous with his time and helping other fellow brokers. So thank you so much, Eric, for your time today, sharing all
Thank
that great
you.
information. You always do a wonderful job.
Thank you. Thank you all. And I just sent my information. So
I think you may have put it in the Q&A. Why don't you try it instead of the chat?
oh, I did. Sorry about that. Let me do that.
Yeah, make sure it goes to everyone. Little drop down.
And then I will put in my phone number as well.
Okay, hold on. I think that just went to hosts and panelists, but
I'm doing it.
you got it. Okay.
There it is. Great. Thanks, Eric. That was fantastic.
All right. Thank you,
Yeah.
Damian. Thank you, Jill.
It's terrific. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody
All right.
for joining us today. It was great to have you. And thank you, Eric. And we will look forward to seeing you next month.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
All right. Have
Bye.
a good one.